there, welcome back to Nowhere Fast Garage, and today is something I've been wanting to do for quite a while, like a comparison video, pros and cons, whatever you want to call it, between an 87 Buick Grand National and also my 86 Olds Cutlass 442. So by now these cars are approaching 40 years old, and probably you figure most people know a lot about them, but maybe you don't. Maybe you're new to them, or you've never owned them and you were curious. So anyway, I'll give you my take on each car. So I've had the Grand National now for a while, probably about going on 15 years. This one, the Olds Cutlass, I've had for over 3 years now. So obviously the Grand National in 87 came with the far superior drivetrain to the Cutlass. The Cutlass seems to me more of like a luxury sport appearance kind of package than a performance car. Now, muscle cars were kind of starting to make a comeback in the early 80s, and it kind of started off, I think, in 82 with the Grand National, and it was a very limited run. They didn't have the turbo engine, and they didn't make that many of them. It wasn't really that widely known or popular. In 83, Oldsmobile came out with the Hearst Olds package, and that was a black car with silver on the bottom, just like this, but it had red pinstriping, and it said Hearst Olds, and the wheels were also they were not gold, they were, I think, silver and chrome. And it had the 307, and I believe they called it an HO. The 307 that they put in it that year put out a little more power. Instead of maybe about 140 horse, it was about 170 or 180. And I believe it had the overdrive transmission, and the thing that everybody loved about it was the Hearst lightning rod shifters. So it also had like a bulge on the hood. So that package was 83, and then they continued it in 84 with the Olds Cutlass, and then they reversed the colors. It was silver and black on the bottom, and also had the lightning rods, same kind of drivetrain. But that year they upgraded the rear axle from the standard GM 7.5 to the 8.5 10 bolt, which was a much beefier rear axle. And 85, I guess they lost their deal, whatever deal they had with Hearst, to call it a Hearst Olds, and then they brought back the 442 trim package, which had been gone for a few years, and pretty much kept the same theme going with the car, with the same drivetrain. They no longer had the Hearst lightning rod shifter, of course, but basically it's a highly optioned Cutlass. The rally gauges were part of it, the bucket seats in the console, and of course the two-tone paint, the special 15-inch wheels. I think normally you would, if you ordered rally wheels on a Cutlass, you got 14-inch by 6. These are 15 by 7. You got the dual exhaust, the blacked out grills, and the headlight buckets, and they put the orange turn signals instead of the whatever you normally would get, the clear. So then when they brought the Buick Grand National back in 82, I think it went away in 83. It came back in 84 and 85 with the turbo engine. And then in 86, they upgraded it and went with the intercooled. They changed the whole design of the turbo system on the engine. So anyway, just looking at the two cars side by side, I mean, I really like the way both of them look. The Grand National is all blacked out, which is really cool, in my opinion, except for the bright chrome wheels, which sets it off nicely. It's like a nice contrast. I know the thing nowadays is to have all black wheels, everything, but I like how there's some kind of pop, some kind of bright trim on the car. Now with the Oldsmobile, they decided to go with a more classic muscle car look with the standard bright trim around the windows, the door handles, but they got rid of the chrome bumpers. They made them the lower body color, which is nice because it's different than all the other Cutlasses. And they kept the like luxury items like the hood ornament, the spear down the middle. It's nice. I like both. But anyway, as far as interiors go, I think Oldsmobile did a slightly better job with the interiors. The burgundy interior maybe is not everyone's favorite, but they also came in all gray, or I think even all blue or tan was an option. This is one of the most popular colors, I think, was the burgundy or the gray. I like how there's full gauges, traditional tack. You got your speedometer, and then you've got your temperature, oil, fuel, and volts. I prefer having all the gauges like that as opposed to in the Buick. I'll show you. It's mostly just lights, warning lights. Not a huge fan of the fake wood grain. As you can see over the years, it fades, and some of it faded differently, so you got like different shades of wood now. But the console is nice. It's got a little storage area, and I like the bucket seats with the chrome trim. It's kind of like a throwback to old school. And also you got the high, it's a little bit higher. It's like a headrest, more like a modern car. And I do like the steering wheel. I'm not going to say it's better than the Buick. They're probably about equal. It's a nice looking wheel, in my opinion. Really makes a big difference. So the Buick interior, I mean, you can't really complain. The seats are a little bit different, but they're still pretty cool. I like the two-tone seats. It's unique to the Grand National. The other turbo Buicks had regular solid color seats. Two-tone on the door panels too. And this is what I mean about the cluster. Just kind of what you would get in a normal Grandpa Regal, except they added a digital tack turbo boost PSI gauge. The rest is all warning lights in here. When I bought this car, the previous owner had added the water temp and the oil, which is very good to have. I like that. And then later on I added a boost gauge that goes above whatever the factory 15 PSI, and fuel pressure gauge, which is important on these especially when you're turning up the boost. I'm not a huge fan of these pillar arrangements. It's not the best looking thing, but it's what I have for now. Oh, and the Scan Master, which reads all of the parameters on the factory computer. Yeah, I can't really say which. Like, I do like the gauges better in the Oldsmobile, but overall the interiors are similar. You can't really complain about either one of them. As far as engine compartments, Oldsmobile went with a dual snorkel air cleaner and put a chrome lid on it to dress it up for the 442 package. Otherwise, everything under here looks the same as it would on your standard 307 Olds Cutlass. There's just a maze of vacuum hoses and wires and tubes, and it's not the greatest looking thing. It's kind of messy. You can't even barely see the engine at all. Now on the Buick here, this is not completely stock. It's mostly stock. The main difference visually being the air intake, which I changed. I removed the factory air intake and added the open element air filter. Also, the mass airflow went bad on this car, so I upgraded it to the later style, like a LS1, I think, or an LT1 mass airflow, which requires a translator box, which I mounted down here out of sight. But otherwise, this would be what you would see in 87, which obviously much cooler. Oh, I upgraded the downpipe to a bigger size too, so that's stainless. Well, the factory one was stainless. This is a better grade of stainless, but definitely a cooler looking engine in my opinion. You can at least see most of the valve covers. And didn't really see anything else like this, as far as I know, in 87. Not too common to see something that looked like this. It's pretty cool looking. Buick went with the PowerMaster electric assist brakes, which were very problematic over the years. Luckily mine still works. This is a low mile car. It's got 24,000 miles. So it's still working, but a lot of times these things fail. They're not easy to fix. Not a lot of places fix them. I don't even know what parts you can still get. So a lot of times people will just take these out and go with the vacuum brake, which would be the same as what came on the Cutlass, which these things are pretty trouble-free and reliable. They pretty much last forever, and if you have any problems, it's easy to get a master cylinder or a brake booster to replace it. I think Buick did that because there was a concern about not having enough vacuum if you're under boost, but I think you know, if you put the vacuum assist setup in here, it's going to be working fine, trouble-free. So this is the intercooler, which has a scoop down low, which picks up fresh air from underneath. And there's even a little bit of a fan, separate intercooler fan down here. The engine cooling fan is electric. On the Oldsmobile, it's the old school mechanical style. I'm not sure if the steering system's the same. It's very similar feel. The Buick feels more power boosted. The Olds has more of a firmer steering feel, but they both steer really well. Both suspensions ride really nice. I would say the Buick rides smoother. It really feels like you're in a cloud, riding in a cloud. It's very like luxury suspension. The Olds is a little more of a sporty feel, but not much. It's still kind of a luxury suspension. Both cars are very smooth and quiet to drive inside. Very comfortable. Easily handle long trips, no problem. They both get about the same fuel mileage, which is not great. The Buick, I converted over to E85 probably about 10 years ago now, just because you can run higher boost on E85. So when you run E85, it consumes more fuel than if you were on gasoline. So I believe this car gets about 13 miles per gallon, and the Olds gets about the same. And that's just like driving around locally. Have not done any highway trips on this, and I have on the Buick. I've driven it a few hours out to Jersey, but that was so long ago I don't remember if I checked the mileage on it. But it probably gets better than 13. Maybe you would get 15 or 16 doing highway driving. I'm not sure. Wheels, definitely think I like the Buick wheels better. They're pretty unique. These wheels were re-chromed. They are the original wheels that were re-chromed. Actually, these hoops were replaced. That's a long story I'm not going to get into right now. They got damaged way back, probably 13 years ago. But they're the factory centerpiece, new hoops, re-chromed, repainted. These old wheels are in kind of rough shape. This car had sat outside for a long time. I could polish them up right now to make them look a little better, but sitting outside over the years, they got rusty, which is a shame. And these are very nice wheels too. I did touch up the paint. I repainted these parts because it was peeling and fading off pretty badly. But definitely a nice looking wheel. But I think the Buick gets the win on the wheels. These are actually reverse wheels, which means this would normally be the back, the inner part of the wheel. On the Buick, they flipped it and made it the outer part, which is confusing when people are mounting your tires, and that's how they got screwed up in the first place. The guy was not familiar with, he was trying to remove them as standard wheels like these are, where you have this raised ridge, which helps getting the tire off. These need to be done face down, because they are reverse. These would be normal, like face up when it's on the tire machine. Obviously the Buick has way more power. It's not stock right now, but when I bought it, it was completely stock, so I've had the experience of both of them being stock. Obviously the Buick is way torqueier, has way more power, has a different sound. I think it's a good sound. Both cars have a really good sound. Oldsmobile engines, even the 307 has a great sound to it. Both have upgraded exhaust. This car has Flowmaster. The Buick has pipes exhaust. But again, you're not, you know, this is more of like a poser car. It's cool to drive around. It looks cool. Drives really nice. Sounds great. And it is a little bit torquey, but compared to modern cars, you know, it's not going to keep up so well. It's barely adequate, I would say. You know, anybody in a Honda minivan is going to blow you away, stoplight to stoplight. So the similarities in the drivetrain is they both share the same transmission and the same rear axle. The 200R4 overdrive is in both of them. The calibration is different in the Buick compared to the Oldsmobile. This transmission in the Buick is programmed to shift firmer, and I believe the shift points are different. They may be a little bit higher. The Buick comes with the 342 axle ratio, which is perfect for the power band in this engine, which from the factory is a low power band. I think by 4,500 to 5,000 RPM, it's done. Same really goes with the Oldsmobile. It's not a high revving engine, but they put a 373 axle ratio in the Oldsmobile. So this will cruise down the highway at a little bit more RPM. If you're going about 60, this will be maybe 2,600, where in the Buick it's roughly 2,300 RPM. Going for a ride in the Cutlass 442. Both of these 80s cars are very comfortable and easy to drive. The interior is nice. They're good on long trips. They go down the road like almost floating, like very smooth, quiet. The steering on both of them is tight. Nice effort for like a modern car. The brakes are very good, and the power on the 442 is, you know, you can keep up with traffic. It's not a fast car by any means. this car is based on. Basically the same car, except it did not have the HO engine like this one does. But there's really not that much difference. I mean, going by my memory from a long time ago, they drive about the same. You're not really going to notice too much power going from a 307 Olds Cutlass, the standard model, to the 442. The radio works good in this one. Actually sounds better than the radio in the Grand National, even though that has the concert sound option with the, it gives you the extra speakers in the lower door panel. What I did was I had some old 6x9s from another G-body I used to own, and I have these old plastic adapters. Put them in the back of this because the original speakers in the back were shot. The radio sounds fantastic. Tape player works good. Power antenna works good. This is like a nice cruising car. A lot of people will LS swap these or put a Chevy 350 or whatever in it, and that's definitely cool, but you can definitely just cruise with the stock drivetrain, you know, unless you're trying to be like a speed racer or something. This car has 96,000 original miles, so it's a little tired, but the engine is in great shape. The oil looks clean. It doesn't smoke, not even on startup. There's no valve train noises or anything. There's a slight exhaust leak, which you might hear, but the engine is smooth and quiet. Transmission is good too. Shifts are not the firmest, probably. I don't know how they were new, but it's fine. The 373 rear axle, it cruises down the highway pretty nice too. Well under 3,000 RPM at regular highway speed. So that's good too. That's one advantage with the 442. If you want to upgrade the engine, you've already got a good overdrive transmission and a good rear axle setup. So you're ahead of the game there. 8.5 rears are pretty strong in their stock form, way better than the 7.5 rear you would get in a standard G-body, standard Cutlass. Another thing I like about these G-bodies, and probably pretty much a lot of 80s cars in general, is the visibility is great. Like, you really feel like you get a great view of the road in every direction. There's no blind spots. When you're backing up, you don't need a backup camera or sensors. You just look out the back and you can see the back of the car. You can see exactly where it ends. It's pretty convenient, pretty easy to park. I have a 2018 Dodge Charger RT and I've had it for like 5 years. I'm still not used to parking it. You cannot see the edges of the car in any direction, so I'm always a little bit off from where I think I'm parking. Now we're taking a ride in the Grand National. And, you know, there's really no comparison. I mean, yes, this car is slightly modified. The The turbo is not original. It's a little bit bigger. The intercooler neck has been replaced and is bigger. It has bigger fuel injectors. It's on E85, which means you can run more boost. So the boost is definitely higher than stock. It's like pretty much double. But even when I first bought this car, I bought this car in 09. It was basically all stock. It had the original exhaust. It had 16,000 miles. Original everything under the hood. So, you know, I still remember how that was driving. You know, it was when I was looking for Grand Nationals, that was the first time I had ever driven them. I had looked at a bunch, but you know, they were all pretty much the same if they were stock. They still feel quick. They're not fast cars by today's standards. I think they ran stock like low 14s, high 13s maybe, quarter-mile times when they were stock. But I mean, that's a huge difference compared to an Olds 442 or Monte Carlo SS or anything else, any other G-body. You know, probably the best out of all of them was the Monte Carlo SS. It had the HO 305, so it definitely felt, you know, felt good, felt like sporty, felt like it had some decent power, I guess. But it is at best a 15-second car, probably more like a 16-second quarter-mile car. So 2 seconds, you know, that's a big difference. And then, you know, because I had owned G-bodies my whole life, and when I first, you know, got into the Grand Nationals, like, I should have done this years ago instead of, you know, messing around with the other ones. I started out with the turbo Buick, because when you do mods to it, it really, really responds. You know, you do a lot of mods to a 305, but it's still a 305. It's not going to get that much better. It should really go crazy. So anyway, this is a tough comparison to the 442 because this car right now has 24,000 miles. It's and, you know, when you're talking about a GM car, low miles makes a huge difference. You know, 24,000 mile versus a 100,000 mile car, you're gonna feel just the way the car feels, the way it drives. Don't get me wrong, the Oldsmobile still drives great. It drives smooth, but you know, the steering column on it's loose. This is very tight. The shifter, even though it's the same shifter, this one clicks in really tight. The directional signals, just everything really. The seat cushions aren't worn. They're firmer. So, and the suspension, of course, too, and the steering is a little bit tighter. But really, I would say it's a night and day difference if you're going to compare any other G-body compared to a turbo Buick. So when you're driving a Grand National, just driving around normally, it's like driving your grandma's Regal. It's quiet. It's a very soft, smooth ride. It feels more like a luxury ride than a sporty muscle car ride, that's for sure. And that's the one knock I would say on the Grand National. If you're into the whole V8 rumble thing and the classic muscle car feel and sound, it's different in the Grand National. Don't get me wrong, it makes its own cool sounds, but it just doesn't, it's just not that same muscle car feeling when it comes to the sound of the V8 and that kind of thing, and the exhaust. Turbo does make pretty cool sounds. So of course then when you're talking about price too, you know, you're going to pay 2 to 3 or more times more for an equivalent turbo Buick compared to a Monte SS or a Cutlass Olds 442. That's just the way it is. The way I feel about these cars is any of these G bodies, Monty SS, like Olds 442, at this point, to me, they're more like collectible. They're more, you know, when they were newer, when they were 5, 10, 15 years old, even 20 years old, they were just like, all right, yeah, buy one, mod it, do whatever you want to it, because there's plenty of them. But now you barely ever see them. So to me, like with the 442, I had all these ideas about swapping the engine, making it faster, making it more fun to drive, but then I just felt like it's probably best to leave this car original. They made under 5,000 of them that year. And just to preserve the history of it. So then when you do that, then you got to figure, well, driving it, it's really not that great. So, you know, and like with this car too, I did a bunch of mods to it when I first got it. Nothing that couldn't easily be reversed. The only thing is I threw away the original exhaust because it was rusting out and had holes in it. But they make reproduction exhausts if you want to put. I could put this car back. It's very original, pretty easily, because I saved all the other parts: the turbo, the intercooler, I even have the OEM computer chip if you really wanted to get crazy, and the original stock fuel injectors. Nothing was cut, nothing was altered in such a way that you couldn't put it back. So that's the dilemma. You know, if you want to have one of these cars, you may not love the original driving experience, because modern cars are so, you know, they've really come a long way with, you know, even like a 4-cylinder is going to put out a lot of power now compared to the way things used to be. Transmission in the Grand National comes calibrated differently too, even though it's the same transmission as the Cutlass, both the 200R4. It's a different valve body in the Grand National, and this one's been rebuilt, but I remember when it was stock, when I first got it, it would easily chirp second gear. It had a really good feel to it, and the higher shift points too, I believe, than in the Oldsmobile. In the end, I'll say that even though there are some significant differences between these two cars, they're both fun to own and are both increasing in value. There's a good reason these cars were so popular when they were new, and they're still very popular almost 40 years later. They have classic styling and are mostly easy and affordable to work on and maintain. I wouldn't hesitate to recommend either. Please leave me a comment and let me know which of these cars you'd rather own. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on Nowhere Fast Garage.